Enter into a realm of fright, blacker than the darkest night. Your sanity hangs by a thread. Welcome to the House of Dread. The once humble cell phone has morphed into an omnipresent entity, an extension of our very souls. And with this standardized technology has evolved a particular phenomenon known as the selfie. In fact, the statistics are staggering. Over 1.2 trillion photos are taken every single year, the majority of which are self-portraits. No longer are we concerned with merely capturing moments of beauty or mischief. We have become obsessed with capturing ourselves, caught in a never-ending loop of self-adoration. We are a generation immersed in a digital reflection where the lines between the real and the virtual are blurred, and the dangers that lurk in the shadows of our obsession remain unseen until it's too late. Enter Chloe. Chloe was a beautiful, vivacious, and very accomplished young woman from the Lone Star State of Texas. At only 26 years old, she had her entire life ahead of her. With her vibrant and lively personality, Chloe was a social butterfly who effortlessly captivated everyone she met. Her charisma was like a magnetic force, drawing people in and making them feel instantly at ease in her presence. Whether it was a crowded room or an intimate gathering, Chloe effortlessly navigated social situations with grace and charm. But Chloe's talents extended far beyond her ability to connect with others. With a passion for health and nutrition, Chloe had built her very own thriving business as a fitness instructor. Her studio was very popular and was constantly filled with people from all walks of life looking to get in shape and become better versions of themselves. However, Chloe had a dark side. She had a tendency to be very self-centered and narcissistic, and she could also be extremely manipulative. As it turned out, the same qualities that made Chloe such a captivating person also made her deceptive and dangerous. Oftentimes, her interactions with people were merely a means to an end, a way to further her own agenda. Her smiles always seemed to hold a hint of calculation, her words carefully crafted to manipulate and control. Chloe's constant craving for attention and admiration was like a bottomless pit. At least part of the reason she chose to become a fitness instructor was because it kept her in the spotlight, where she could receive an endless supply of validation from her clients, particularly her male clients. In addition, Chloe's level of narcissism was off the charts. She believed herself to be the epitome of perfection, an untouchable goddess among mere mortals. She basked in the glory of her own reflection and truly believed the world revolved around her. One of the ways in which this pompous attitude manifested itself in Chloe was through her obsession with taking pictures of herself. Yes, Chloe was addicted to taking selfies. It was as if her phone was an extension of her arm, always ready to capture her every expression, every angle, and every fleeting moment of her existence. And she never missed an opportunity to indulge in this ritual, even when it was completely inappropriate. At family gatherings, when laughter and conversation filled the air, Chloe would discreetly excuse herself to the nearest bathroom. There, in the solitude of the small, dimly lit space, she would transform into a self-portrait artist. She would contort her face into a myriad of expressions, experimenting with different angles and lighting, desperate to get the ultimate shot. Chloe had no shame when it came to gratifying her thirst for selfies. During weddings, funerals, and even in the middle of intimate conversations, she would seize the opportunity to immortalize herself. Chloe's obsession with capturing her own image had become an all-consuming force in her life. Her social media profiles were nothing but digital shrines that stood as a testament to her extreme levels of self-aggrandizement. Now, some of Chloe's friends and family thought her obsession with selfies was befitting. After all, Chloe was young, in shape, and highly attractive. But others thought it was arrogant and excessive. They saw it as a reflection of her inflated ego and lack of genuine connection with others. But Chloe could care less about people's opinions regarding her selfie fetish. As far as she was concerned, she was doing what made her happy, and that was all that mattered. One hot summer evening, Chloe was driving home from a long day of training clients in her fitness studio. She was tired, but feeling good. Suddenly, it began to rain. The cool rainwater making contact with the hot concrete caused steam to rise from the ground. This, in combination with the intense humidity, created a light mist that affected Chloe's visibility. Naturally, she reduced her speed and turned on her low beams. Blasting her radio and feeling particularly sexy, Chloe had a sudden realization. She thought to herself that she had never taken a selfie while driving in her car before. It was an absolute must-have for her collection. That's right. In the middle of a severe thunderstorm, with low visibility and rain pouring down like nobody's business, Chloe's vanity had convinced her that this was as good a time as any to take a damn selfie. Chloe's heart raced with excitement as she reached for her cell phone. She couldn't resist the temptation to capture the perfect driving selfie to post on her social media. With shaky hands, she carefully positioned the phone in her dash mount. Chloe's eyes darted nervously between the road ahead and her phone's camera. Throwing caution to the wind and ignoring every ounce of her common sense, Chloe continued adjusting the angle of the phone with painstaking precision. Every slight movement she made threatened to veer her car off the road, but she was determined to get that picture. Outside her car, the world seemed to blur as her focus narrowed solely on the task at hand. The passing trees and street signs became mere flashes of color, blurs of reality. At this point, only the screen of her cell phone held any significance for Chloe. Finally, she had successfully positioned her camera and was ready to press the capture button, when suddenly, Chloe looked up just in time to see the rear end of the car that was in front of her quickly emerging from the mist. Chloe immediately jammed on the brakes, but it was too late. Her vehicle slid in the pouring rain and slammed right into the back of the car in front of her, causing a serious accident. Suddenly, other cars that had been traveling behind Chloe began swerving off the road in an effort to avoid colliding with her. And within a matter of minutes, the once calm and orderly roadway had become a chaotic mess of twisted metal and shattered glass. Chloe's heart was pounding in her chest as she sat frozen in her car, her hands trembling and shaking with intense anxiety. Chloe was highly embarrassed and deeply ashamed of herself. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as she desperately tried to gather her shattered composure. She could only pray that no one had been killed as a result of her reckless and irresponsible behavior. Within minutes, the road was swamped with police officers and emergency medical personnel. Fortunately, no one had been killed in the tragic accident, but several people, not including Chloe, had to be rushed away to the hospital with severe injuries. As the officers investigated the scene of the crash, it was determined that bad road conditions combined with poor visibility were to blame for the accident. Chloe had dodged a major bullet. It was never discovered by the authorities that the true cause of the accident was Chloe's negligence. Tens of thousands of dollars in property damage, combined with the tragedy of once perfectly healthy people who were now hospitalized, was the byproduct of Chloe's arrogance and pride. Now, this should have been a defining moment for Chloe, who had been given a second chance at life. This should have been the sobering moment that made her realize how extreme her selfie obsession had become. Unfortunately, however, this was not the case. About a month later, Chloe was cruising along in her brand new car, a replacement for her previous one that had been totaled in the accident. As mentioned, Chloe was fortunate enough to escape the car crash without any injuries, and so life merely went on for her as if nothing had ever happened. She was back to training full-time at her fitness studio like she had never missed a beat. And she was also back to something else, taking endless selfies. In fact, it seemed like her habit had gotten even worse. Chloe was now taking twice as many selfies as she had been before, as if that was even possible. But it was, and Chloe was at it every day. Her obsession had taken a very dark turn, and it was as if she had learned nothing from the wreck she had caused only a short month ago. People had been hospitalized because of Chloe, and she was extremely lucky to have gotten off without any serious legal ramifications. But to her, all of that meant nothing. In Chloe's mind, the accident was already a distant memory, and the lives she changed forever on that fateful night were mere footnotes in her quest for the perfect selfie. One morning, Chloe stood in the locker room of her fitness studio, ready to tackle another training session. The warm rays of the sun streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on her reflection in the mirror. Her chestnut hair was neatly pulled back into a ponytail, and her dark brown eyes were filled with determination. With a deep breath, Chloe adjusted her workout gear and reached for the doorknob. But just as her hand touched the cool metal, a sudden idea sparked in her mind. She paused and thought to herself, why not take a quick selfie? A mischievous smile began spreading across her face. She turned back towards the mirror, positioning her phone in front of her. Holding it up high, Chloe tilted her head slightly to the side, puckered her lips to make a kissy face, and then pressed the capture button. A soft click echoed through the room, capturing Chloe in her provocative pose. As she lowered her phone to check the image, she felt a sense of gratification. But her gratification quickly turned into confusion and then into unease. There, off to her right, was a distortion in the picture that seemed to defy explanation. It was as if the very fabric of the photo itself had been tampered with. Chloe's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the glitch. It was a swirling mass of darkness, like an ink spill spreading across the frame. It seemed to stretch and twist contorting into unnatural shapes. The edges of the glitch were jagged and uneven, like shattered glass ready to pierce the fragile surface of reality. Chloe was thoroughly confused as she stared at the eerie anomaly in her photo. Just what the hell was this? Was there something wrong with her cell phone? Unfortunately, Chloe didn't have time to sort it out, as it was now time to start her fitness class. Chloe decided to simply shrug it off as she placed her phone in her workout bag and ventured out of the locker room to meet with her training clients. An hour later, Chloe's heart was racing with excitement and a sense of accomplishment as she wrapped up another successful training session with her clients. The energy in the room was contagious, and she couldn't help but feel a surge of positivity coursing through her veins. As the class came to an end and her clients began packing up their belongings, Chloe found herself brimming with confidence and a newfound sense of invincibility. As Chloe was preparing to head home, she decided to take a post-workout selfie. Suddenly, a small flicker of doubt crept into her mind. She couldn't shake the memory of that eerie glitch in the photo she had taken earlier. Brushing it off as a mere fluke, she pushed the unsettling thought to the back of her mind and struck a sexy pose, ready to capture her radiant post-workout glow. With a sexy smile, she snapped the photo and eagerly reviewed the image. But as her eyes scanned the screen, her heart plummeted into her stomach. There again, amidst her flawless features and radiant smile, was the same swirling mass of darkness she had encountered before. Only this time, it seemed to have grown, consuming more of the photo and commanding her attention like a sinister black hole. Confusion washed over Chloe like a chilling wave, and her once upbeat and energetic demeanor began to waver. She stared at the image, her mind racing to find an explanation for this inexplicable phenomenon. Was it a trick of the light? A glitch in her phone's camera? Just what the hell was going on? Her anxiety intensified, intertwining with her confusion as she frantically scrolled through the previous photos on her phone. And to her dismay, she discovered that the darkness had tainted every single one of her selfie pics. Each image was marred by the presence of the ominous mass, growing more prominent with each passing photo. Chloe's mind was blown, and she was becoming increasingly irritated as she thought to herself that she had never noticed the black mass in her other pics before now. Was she losing her mind? The next day, Chloe decided to visit the local retail store of her cell phone provider, eager to show off the glitch in her photographs to tech support. As she walked into the bustling retail store of her service provider, her heart was racing with anticipation and a sliver of hope. With a determined stride, she approached the tech support desk, ready to explain her predicament. The friendly tech support agent greeted Chloe with a warm smile, his eyes filled with genuine concern. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and began to explain the haunting issue that had been plaguing her camera. She fumbled with her phone, her fingers trembling slightly, before finally pulling up the pictures she had taken. Chloe's heart sank as she scrolled through her pictures and could clearly see that the unsettling black mass was still there, seemingly taunting her as if it had a sinister mind of its own. Chloe handed her phone to the tech support agent and asked him for his opinion on what could be causing the glitch in her photos. But as the tech support agent peered closely at the screen, confusion clouded his face. His brow furrowed, and his eyes darted back and forth searching for the anomaly that Chloe so clearly saw. To his dismay, he saw nothing. No trace of the chilling black mass that was giving Chloe nightmares. In fact, as far as the tech agent could see, the pictures were perfectly fine. Chloe's frustration began to boil, threatening to spill over. How could he not see it? It was right there, mocking her, daring her to believe her own eyes. She pleaded with the tech support agent, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. She pointed at the screen, her finger trembling in frustration, as if commanding him to see what she saw. Finally, a second tech support agent was summoned over, hoping to lend a fresh perspective to the perplexing situation. Chloe's eyes darted anxiously between the two agents, her heart pounding in her chest. She held her breath, hoping that a new set of eyes would finally validate her fears. But as the second agent examined the images, he had the same perplexed expression on his face. Now both of the agents were shaking their heads in disbelief, unable to comprehend Chloe's distress. It was as if an invisible barrier separated them, preventing them from seeing the creepy black mass that had infected every one of Chloe's selfie pics. Chloe began to feel like the tech agents were trying to make her think she was crazy, and she began to get very irate with the support staff. But they began to ask Chloe to calm down as they continued to search for a solution. In a last-ditch effort, the tech support agents decided to take random pictures within the store. Chloe watched with a mix of anticipation and dread as they snapped away, capturing the mundane details of the retail space. A knot tightened in her stomach, wondering if the black mass would somehow manifest in these new images, finally revealing itself to the now skeptical eyes of the tech support team. Once the impromptu photo session was over, Chloe and the support staff gathered around, eager to review the newly captured pictures. With bated breath, they scrolled through the images one by one, their eyes scanning for any sign of the enigmatic black mass. But to Chloe's dismay, there was nothing. Not a single trace of the sinister presence that had been haunting her photos. Chloe was outdone. Her level of frustration and confusion was beyond anything she could have expressed with words. The tech agents did their best to sympathize with Chloe in her distressing situation, but without being able to visibly see what Chloe could see, there really wasn't much they could do with regard to troubleshooting her phone. Finally, after observing the look of exasperation on Chloe's face, one of the agents made a generous offer to replace Chloe's phone. He rationalized that there was no way two phones could have the exact same problem, especially one that was as intermittent as this particular problem seemed to be. Chloe thanked the tech support team and waited patiently as they swapped out her phone and transferred all of her files. Later that day, as Chloe left the store and made her way to her car, she stopped, pulled out her new phone, and began taking random pictures of the parking lot. She even turned around and snapped a picture of the storefront, making every effort to test her new camera. After snapping a number of pics, Chloe stopped and opened up her photo gallery to see how they had turned out. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she meticulously scrolled through each picture, carefully scanning for any signs of that creepy black mass. But to Chloe's surprise and relief, it wasn't there. Not a single picture held the ominous presence that she had feared. Satisfied with the outcome of her pictures, Chloe climbed into her car and proceeded to drive home. At least for now, she was feeling a sense of relief that she had finally resolved her issue and was ready to get back to living her life. The next day, Chloe was training clients in her studio, feeling more alive than ever. After the session, a few of Chloe's students asked if she would take a group picture with them. Chloe agreed, and she pulled out her cell phone and put her arm around the students, snapping the picture. Still a bit traumatized from the previous day's events, Chloe nervously reviewed the photo to make sure it had come out okay, which it did. She immediately shared the picture with her students, who were excited and said they were going to post it on their social media with a caption that read, "Just finished training at Chloe's Fitness." Chloe smiled as she knew that this would be great marketing for her studio. And as she packed up her things in preparation to close the studio and head home, Chloe felt a sense of hope and optimism that she hadn't felt in quite some time. The accident she'd had a month ago, coupled with the recent creepy events with her cell phone, had all converged and shaken Chloe's confidence. But now she was starting to feel like things were coming around. The picture she had taken with her students inspired her with a burst of new ideas for how to market and promote her fitness studio, and she was ready to pour all of her energy into both her personal and professional growth and development. That evening, Chloe and her boyfriend were enjoying a romantic dinner at a trendy restaurant. The atmosphere was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, and Chloe felt a surge of excitement as she sipped her wine. Dressed to the nines in a sultry black dress that hugged her curves and heels that accentuated her long legs, she couldn't help but feel confident and alluring. As the main course arrived, Chloe excused herself from the table, telling her boyfriend she'd be right back. She made her way through the dimly lit restaurant, the soft sounds of conversation and the muted clatter of cutlery filling the air. With a quick glance in the mirror, she adjusted her hair and smoothed down the fabric of her dress before entering the ladies' room. Inside the sanctuary of the restroom, Chloe took a moment to collect herself. She washed her hands, the cool water soothing her nerves. Feeling a renewed sense of self-assurance, she decided to capture the moment with a selfie. She held up her phone, angling it just right to capture her radiant smile and the tantalizing hint of her cleavage. Then she snapped the picture, feeling confident and empowered. With a sense of anticipation, Chloe tapped the screen to review the photo. But as the image appeared, her excitement turned into horror. There in the corner of the photo was the haunting black mask she thought she had left behind. Yes, the ominous presence had returned, but this time, something was radically different. It was bigger, closer, and seemed to be taking up more of the photograph. In a moment of daring curiosity, Chloe pressed her trembling fingers against the screen, zooming in on the chilling image. Her heart pounded in her chest as the details became clearer. The black mask had now taken on a visible form. A grotesque face and hands were now emerging from its depths. Its demonic features were twisted with a malevolent, sinister grin that was etched upon its ghastly face. Its hands, like talons, reached out towards her, as if longing to drag her into the dark abyss. Chloe let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the empty restroom. Her body trembled with fear as she stumbled backward in absolute terror and disbelief. Panic began to consume Chloe, her mind overwhelmed with the realization that something truly wicked had invaded her life. Suddenly, several other women who had heard Chloe screaming entered the restroom to check and see if she was okay. Chloe immediately held up her phone in an effort to showcase the demonic presence that had taken over her selfie pic. But to her dismay, the ladies couldn't see the dark entity. To them, it just looked like a normal picture. Chloe became enraged and began cursing at the women who were only trying to help, but who simply could not see what Chloe saw. Suddenly, Chloe's boyfriend, along with the restaurant manager, burst into the restroom, inquiring if they needed to call 911. Again, Chloe held up her phone in an effort to show them the haunting image, but they couldn't see anything either. Chloe began yelling and screaming, pointing at her phone and scolding everyone for not being able to see what she saw. But of course, this did nothing to help the situation. Chloe's boyfriend made every effort to calm her down, but by now Chloe was in hysterics and totally inconsolable. She had completely lost her appetite, and all she wanted to do now was go home. That night, Chloe sat alone in her dimly lit apartment. Her mind was racing as she tried to make sense of the chaotic events that unfolded at the restaurant. Fear, frustration, and confusion overwhelmed her like a dense fog, leaving her grasping for every ounce of her sanity. Chloe simply couldn't understand. How could she be the only one who saw the dark entity in her photos? It felt like a cruel joke, as if someone was conspiring against her, making every effort to send her to the psych ward. In fact, Chloe was starting to wonder if she was indeed losing her mind and descending into the very depths of insanity. The uncertainty clawed at her, leaving her trembling in the dark, haunted by a myriad of unanswered questions. The next day at Chloe's fitness studio, the air was thick with anticipation. Her students eagerly gathered around, ready for their daily workout. But as Chloe stepped onto the floor, it was clear that something was off. It was apparent that she wasn't her usual high-energy self. Her face, normally radiant and animated, was now plagued with worry. The twinkle in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a distant gaze. It was as if a deep depression had overcome her, casting a dark spell over the once vibrant studio. The students exchanged concerned glances with each other, sensing that their beloved instructor was carrying a heavy burden. But despite their curiosity, Chloe had decided she wasn't going to reveal the source of her distress. Instead, she plastered on a phony smile, her lips stretching tightly over her troubled thoughts. With each move she made, her once fluid motions became robotic and mechanical, devoid of their usual grace and enthusiasm. Even her voice, once brimming with energy and encouragement, now held a hollow quality, lacking its usual warmth and conviction. As the class followed her lead, the stale energy emanating from Chloe began to infect the entire room. The vibrant atmosphere that usually filled the studio with laughter and camaraderie was replaced by a somber mood. The infectious joy that accompanied each exercise routine had dissipated, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. The students, accustomed to the invigorating rhythm of Chloe's classes, found themselves moving through the motions with a sense of detachment. The once lively and engaging fitness session now felt mundane and lifeless, as if the very spirit of the studio itself had been drained away. That night, after the soul-sucking workout session, many of Chloe's students were eager to pack their things and head home. The socializing that normally took place after the classes didn't happen that particular night, and within minutes of the session being dismissed, the studio was completely empty, and Chloe sat in the middle of the floor crying. By this point, she was on a roller coaster of emotions. Just a few short days ago, she was feeling confident and optimistic, looking forward to growing her studio and getting a new lease on life. Now she was right back in the gutter, wondering if she'd be able to face another day. As Chloe sat with her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face, she had a sudden insight about the pictures in her phone. She realized that the only time she ever saw the dark entity in her photos was when she took selfies. She immediately flashed back to the day the tech support team took pictures with her phone inside the retail store, and the picture she had taken just the other day with one of her students. Everything was fine until she took the selfie in the restaurant the previous night. Chloe's heart fluttered with hope as she wondered if she was starting to notice a pattern. Then Chloe had another interesting thought. If it was true that the dark entity only revealed itself when she took her selfies, then what were the implications of that? Did this mean that she would have to go the rest of her life never being able to take another selfie? Chloe began to feel a strong sense of indignation rising up within her. Whatever the hell this thing was, it had some damn nerve invading her life and trying to scare her away from taking her beloved selfies. Chloe's fear had suddenly turned into anger that had finally reached a boiling point. She reasoned that if this thing was going to keep showing up in her selfies, she would just crop the images, erasing the chilling figure from her photographs so she could get back to enjoying her favorite hobby. In an act of defiance, Chloe began slowly raising her phone in the air to take another selfie. With a half-hearted smile and struggling to steady her trembling hand, she pressed the capture button and realized she had made a terrible mistake. There, standing directly behind her, with a menacing grin, was a figure straight out of her darkest nightmares. Its eyes were deep, hollow, and pitch black with pure evil. Its skin clung tightly to a skeletal frame, while its sinister grin was filled with rotting teeth that looked like jagged shards of broken glass. Long, bony fingers with razor-sharp claws snaked out from its palms, reaching for Chloe as if to rip out her very soul. Chloe mistakenly thought her indignation would give her the strength to face the darkness that had latched on to her like a parasite. But she realized in that very moment that she was no match for the unholy creature staring back at her. Chloe screamed and dropped her phone in sheer terror. Suddenly, Chloe heard a terrifying sound that seemed to be coming from directly behind her. But she spun around only to find out there was nothing there. Chloe decided she wasn't going to hang around to investigate. In a panic, she made a break for the exit. Frantically pulling and pushing against the door like a mad woman, Chloe desperately tried to escape, but the damn door was sealed tight as if somebody had locked her inside. Chloe began pounding on the door, screaming for someone to let her out. Then, without warning, the building lost power. The lights went out, and within seconds, Chloe was thrown into pitch blackness. As she stood frozen in the dark, Chloe's racing mind was gripped with terror. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, and her heart felt as if it was going to burst out of her chest. Chloe was so frightened and confused. Just what the hell was this thing? And why was it tormenting her? With every selfie she took, the menacing presence had come closer and closer, and now it seemed as if it was trying to exit her phone and manifest itself in her physical reality. What in God's name was going on? And more importantly, how could she stop it? Chloe desperately wanted to call for help, but she forgot that she had dropped her phone and now had no idea where it was or how she was going to find it in the dark. Chloe was also scared out of her mind and didn't want to move a muscle. But she also knew that merely standing there in the dark wasn't going to get her any closer to safety. Reluctantly, Chloe began crawling around on her hands and knees, feeling around on the floor, desperately trying to find her cell phone. The pitch-black studio was eerily quiet, and all Chloe could hear was the sound of her heavy breathing and her pounding heart that was beating a mile a minute. Chloe, who had never been particularly religious, began praying as she continued crawling around, patting the floor and making sweeping motions with her hands, struggling to locate her phone. Never before had she experienced such terror, and all she wanted now was to be able to see daylight again. Seconds felt like hours as Chloe kept searching, her fear morphing into frustration. Where the hell was it? Suddenly, Chloe's phone started receiving an incoming call, causing it to light up in the dark. Overcome with relief, Chloe lunged for the phone and immediately saw that it was her boyfriend. Her shaking hands held the phone tighter than a pair of vice grips as she feverishly answered the call. Chloe was hysterical as she desperately tried to explain her terrifying ordeal to her boyfriend. She told him that she had somehow gotten locked in the fitness studio. The lights were out, and she was hearing horrifying noises. Her cracking voice was filled with panic, tears welling up in her eyes as she fought hard to maintain her delicate composure. Chloe's boyfriend told her that he was on his way, his voice filled with determination and offering much-needed solace and reassurance to Chloe, who felt like she was on the very brink of losing her mind. As Chloe sat in the dark, waiting on her boyfriend, she noticed that she was feeling slightly better but was still very much on edge. She figured the best thing she could do now was to remain alert and still. As Chloe sat in the middle of the floor, her mind started toying with her, conjuring up images of the dark figure lurking in the corners, waiting to pounce on her at a moment's notice. The momentary sense of comfort Chloe had enjoyed after ending the call with her boyfriend began to dissipate as her terror started to rise once again. Chloe grew increasingly impatient as she sat wondering just how long it was going to take for her boyfriend to show up. She knew he didn't live that far from the studio, and she only regretted not getting an ETA before hanging up with him. Chloe sat in the floor, hugging her knees and rocking back and forth, trying to calm her nerves. It had been a while since she had heard any strange noises, but the simple fact that she was sitting in pitch blackness, unable to see her surroundings, was driving her to the very breaking point. Suddenly, there was loud pounding on the door to Chloe's fitness studio. Her heart fluttered with hope as she felt the cavalry had finally arrived. Carefully navigating her way through the dark, she started making her way to the door. Then Chloe's phone began to ring. Again, it was her boyfriend. Chloe answered and told her boyfriend she was on her way to the door so they could figure out a way to get it open. But to her shock and astonishment, her boyfriend told her he was at home and was just calling to check on her and see how she was doing after the incident at the restaurant. Chloe couldn't believe what she was hearing. She became frustrated and started scolding her boyfriend, asking him how could he not know what she was talking about when she had just spoken to him a few moments ago. She also asked him why he was still at home and unable to comprehend the seriousness of her predicament. Again, Chloe told her story about being locked in the studio with no power and hearing creepy sounds. But Chloe's boyfriend swore this was the first time he had heard from her all day, and he had no awareness of her situation. Chloe's heart almost stopped as she started thinking to herself, if her boyfriend was still at home and had no clue of what she was talking about, then who had she spoken to on the phone earlier? And more importantly, who the hell was that at the door? The persistent pounding seemed to be getting louder and more intense. Chloe began slowly backing away from the door to her studio as she realized her terrifying ordeal was far from over. Chloe's boyfriend, who was still on the phone, began calling her name and asking if she was okay. But Chloe never responded. She was frozen with terror and couldn't even think, let alone speak. Out of nowhere, Chloe began hearing guttural demonic growls that echoed through her studio like a chamber of horrors. The growling, the pounding, the darkness. Chloe suddenly had the terrifying realization that she was never going to leave her studio, and that it was time to say goodnight. A short time later, Chloe's boyfriend showed up at the fitness studio with the police, who surprisingly had to use a battering ram just to get through the door. Once they were inside, Chloe's boyfriend and the police searched the entire studio, including the locker rooms, but Chloe was nowhere to be found. However, one particular item of Chloe's was left behind, giving a clear indication that she had indeed been there. Her cell phone. It was lying face down on the floor, and Chloe's boyfriend happened to be the first person to find it. He picked the cell phone up off the floor and proceeded to flip it over. His eyes were wide with terror and disbelief at the horrifying image that stared back at him from the screen of Chloe's phone. Engulfed in a ring of fire, the once vibrant and beautiful Chloe was now captured in a snapshot of pure horror. Her eyes were wide with terror and her face was twisted in a gruesome expression of pain and anguish. The demonic entity that had plagued her selfies had finally caught up to her, its ghastly and grotesque features more terrifying and sinister than ever. The police officers gathered around, their faces pale with shock as they examined the haunting image. They exchanged uneasy glances with each other, their minds struggling to comprehend the inexplicable horrors that had unfolded within the walls of the fitness studio. The darkness had finally consumed Chloe, leaving behind only a chilling reminder of her existence. As the officers called for backup and continued their search for Chloe, her boyfriend's mind raced with a mix of emotions. Fear, anger, and guilt all swirled within him, tearing at his sanity. For the first time, he could finally see what Chloe had been trying to tell him about at the restaurant the other night. But of course, now it was too late. Poor Chloe. She never realized that the demonic presence in her selfies was connected to her own vanity and narcissism. All she had to do was overcome her self-absorption, and the malevolent spirit would have been banished from her life forever. However, in the end, for the price of her soul, Chloe got exactly what she wanted, the ultimate selfie, and it cost her everything. Oh, be leery of the dangers of being too self-centered in one's life, for the path to ruin is often paved with the shattered remains of those who became consumed by their own inflated egos. Don't practice self-negation, but at the same time, don't practice self-worship. Because just like Chloe, you may come to discover that the darkness lurking within can consume you whole, leaving you nothing but a hollow shell of your former self. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And if you're in need of a narrator for your next project, or you just want to say hello, contact me at thehouseofdread666@gmail.com. Until the next tale of terror, this is Victor Bloodborne. Stay dreadful.